Oh, wait, it
Oh,
just
there,
changed a little bit.
there it
There.
is.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, what's going on, man?
Charles, what's up, my brother?
So we got Matt Hand here for our second interview out of our Forza Athletics podcast. Now, Matt and I have known each other for,
Long
gosh, that
time.
was a long time. Yeah. So Matt's going to tell us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into throwing?
So, I grew up watching the Scottish Highland Games as a kid, and that got me interested in doing track and field in high school. So that's a little bit of reverse for some people.
Sure.
Usually it's the other way around. But I actually started doing track and field because one day I wanted to do the Highland Games.
Okay. So did your
Um,
no,
Yeah, so I was an okay high school athlete, nothing special because I had zero coaching. Um, I was fortunate enough to have somebody show me the power position my first year, and then that was it. That was my whole.
sure.
So I kind of ride or die with that. I did power position shot put my entire high school career.
How'd that go for you?
40 feet. um, so I thought my career was over.
Sure.
So I went 40 and 120 in high school.
Okay.
And then I went to Alfred State University on an academic scholarship,
Mhm.
full ride there. And then the coach there, Gary Moore,
Mhm.
Gary doesn't let anybody that knows how to do anything with track and field just walk on campus without at least coming out and trying.
Sure.
That's why he dominated the NJCAA for years
Right.
with such a good program. It's like because they had all those 2-year guys come up from like New York City and Rochester
Right.
for the vocational school.
Right.
And then you get people like me who are just there for the academic because Alfred State had this program. Anybody over 95 and 1200 on the SAT, full ride if you're a New York State
Right.
resident.
Right.
So, and for me, that was only 20 minutes from home. So I'll take the full ride because I don't know what I want to do.
Right. So is that why you made that decision to go there? Is because you didn't know what you wanted to do?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I knew at Alfred State I was going to be able to do it for free.
Sure.
So, um,
Test the waters a little bit.
yeah, for sure. Then I got into doing college track and field, and then that's where I really fell in love with track.
Yeah.
Was at Alfred State with doing it at the collegiate level, actually having coaching, actually having a team. So my high school team, there 3 of my 4 years by year's end, once we got to tournament time, I was the only guy on the team.
Right.
Like at all. So we'd have like maybe 5-6 girls and then me.
Yeah.
So like having a team at Alfred State was awesome. And all these kids from Edison Tech up in Rochester who
Right.
were just lights out fast.
Yeah.
Like, but they were all there for like electrician and HVAC and all the different things that vocationally that Alfred offers. But they were able to do 2 years of NJCAA athletics. So we had a 10-2 guy at the NJCAA level in the 100.
Right.
That's blazing at that level.
Yeah.
And then once I kind of fell in love there, and then I went to a clinic with Jesse Doty. He recruited me to come to Brockport because I was doing a 2 and transfer.
Right.
He had me come take the tour. I fell in love with it, and then he recruited me, but then he left. He went to go train down at Duke, and then I got to train with Ed, and that was one of the best. Not a decision I made to train with Ed, but it was the best non-decision I've ever made.
Right.
My love for lifting comes from Ed. A lot of my attitude, like how I handle life, it all comes from him. Like what a just a great role model for young men is Ed Jaskolski at Brockport.
Now I was just gonna say that. So those teams that you were on in those late 08, 09.
Yep.
Right. So it was probably I would say because I was out of coaching at the time, but I was still trying to throw. I would say
that's where we met each other.
Right. So I'd say that those are probably some of the best teams that Ed's had. I mean, you were Dom Gonzalez was on the team, Jake Basher, right?
Yeah. So I came in when Basher graduated.
Right.
But in that generation, you had Basher, you had Josh Dupuis, who racked up the All-Americans.
Right. Shot put, yeah.
You had Dominic, you had Ray Lund hit an All-American in there.
Right.
And then you had the emergence of Steph Powell,
right?
Who Ed pulled out of volleyball cuts
to
become an All-American hammer thrower.
Right.
Can't complain about that. And then and pulling out SUNYAC champions out of walk-ons.
Right.
Like Zach Williamson and those guys. So that was my junior year. The throwers just destroyed SUNYACs.
Right.
6 out of 8 in discus scoring position,
Right.
5 out of 8 in hammer, and 4 out of 8 in shot. Like
So
just absolutely murdered the throws.
so tell me about that. Like so you get there. So you're a one man show in high school.
Yeah.
And you then at Alfred, you kind of have some teammates, but then you transition to Brockport. So
Right.
what was the transition like from Alfred to Brockport to like, whoa, like I'm like
Yeah,
in the middle of the pack.
it
Yeah.
was definitely a whole squad thing. Like that was
Right.
definitely and quite honestly, it was the beginning of the reign of Ed Jaskulski as like
Right.
one of the top Division III coaches.
Yep.
Because now there's no more Jesse, and like as good of a thrower as Jesse was, like he brought his own problems
Right.
with like political things.
Right.
So Ed kind of that got rid of it. Ed brought in this just dominant lifting program, the mindset. And quite honestly, as good as that team was our junior year, it was almost even better.
Right.
Because on the block, so myself transferred from Alfred State. I was the top thrower from that school.
Right.
And then Bridget Main, one of Paul Rose's kids, transferred.
Oh, that's right. I remember.
And she was a dominant thrower for them.
Yep.
As well as 3 more student athletes had put their papers in to transfer, but they ended up going to different schools.
Right.
Including Nick Kahanick.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Brandy Nash almost came along as well, and then
Right.
Jackie Holmberg, who was my teammate at Alfred State.
Right.
So as good as that team was, it was almost even better. Like I feel like if all of us would have transferred there, like I think the NCAA would have had to investigate. Like, what are you doing to get all these transfers in? But
yeah. So you've mentioned mindset a couple times.
yeah.
So what was it? Well, what was it then about Brockport? Because I mean, really, the train hasn't slowed down.
No.
I just had another All-American weight thrower, Jess, last year, 2 double national champion in the shot put.
Yep.
So what is it about Brockport that just everyone goes lights out there?
It's kind of ride or die with the program. Ed's lifting is probably arguably the best strength and conditioning coach in Division III.
Right.
You'd be hard pressed to have a better strength and conditioning coach. And it's built on sustainable success with your lifting,
right?
Which is big. So that has a lot to do with it. And then that mentality of, and a lot of it to do because Ed still lifts too. So I think everyone wants to lift with him at this point. Like not as much as he used to. Like he still lifts as much weight-wise, but not as often with the other athletes.
Right.
But still there's that mindset of you want to get in there, you want to be strong, and then the history of the athletes before you too, because like each generation is strong, so the knowledge is getting passed along, and that weight room mindset is there. So you can, especially at Division III, like it's not necessarily the best term, but it's essentially it's polishing, turd polishing.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like pulling people out of nowhere and turning them into by hard work, good technique, and being strong as shit.
Right. And that's actually another thing too. So as everyone's graduated, I mean, you've transitioned extremely well in the Highland Games into more strength focused. I mean, Steph Powell deadlifts more than, I mean, what, 550? Yeah, more than a lot of people. Yeah. I mean, so the tradition graduates, but then you guys continue on after the fact. So after you wrapped up your career at Brockport, tell us how you transitioned a little bit into the Highland Games.
So while I was at Alfred and Brockport, I had my toe in the water in the Highland Games. I would do them during the summers. I would do a couple just the local shows, and then after I graduated Brockport, I kind of had a year or two where I was trying to figure out my career, trying to figure out if I was going to keep doing with the Highland Games.
Right.
And then I ended up having kind of a low point in 2012 where I made no progress whatsoever. I wasn't dedicating the time in the gym. And basically, so after that 2012 season, I kind of made a commitment to myself. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go balls out this year. I'm going to fully lift again, full programming, regular scheduled practices, all these things. If I don't improve this year, I'm going to hang them up because it wasn't fun anymore. I was getting passed by guys that were new to the sport. That really I had no business losing to, in my opinion.
Okay.
And that was kind of my breaking point. It was a games in October in Buffalo, a backyarder, and I got sixth at a game where I should have been the second best thrower out of six.
Sure.
And I sat in a shower for a good like 2-3 hours, like just with the water just running, just like contemplating like what am I doing with this? Because like I'm going to all these games, but I'm not actually training for them. Like, do I either hang it up or do I actually dedicate to this and see where it can go? And then after that year, I got my first invite to my first national championship after the 2013 season.
So how was so tell us about that. So that 2012 season. So why do you think you didn't perform as well?
I wasn't dedicated to it. I was just I was treating it like a hobby, not a sport or a passion. I was just going to the competitions, the local competitions. I wasn't practicing at all, and I wasn't in the weight room. I was just working.
Okay.
And the job I had at the time, I mean, as the first job out of college, you're not getting paid a lot of money,
Right.
and I was actually and I was traveling a lot for that company too. So I was not making a lot of money and on the road. So I couldn't do like daily rates at gyms while I was out there. So I was kind of lifting here and there, and I wasn't practicing at all. So that had a lot to do with it.
So with Highland Games, so can you explain? Because I'm still trying to figure it out myself. So
sure.
If you transition, so somebody who's going to do their first Highland Games, so there's like different levels, right? Like D, C, B, A, like amateur level.
Yeah, it depends on where. Like if you're out west,
okay,
they have a lot bigger following for the groups like the novice C and B groups. I think Virtuon just more people, but those C's and B's, they don't travel anywhere. They'll go to their 1 or 2 games a year.
Okay.
And a lot of what I found in those groups is it's a race to be second place, not first, because once you win, you get moved up to the next group, and nobody wants that.
Sure.
So it's a lot of guys that they want to collect swords, but they don't want to actually get moved up to the next group where they're going to get their ass handed to them. So I found that a lot.
So the
out here, out the East Coast, we don't have as many divisions. We have mostly A or open. So there's guys that, like, if they were out west, would be a B or C, but because of where they are, they're more in the open, or they just compete in A whether they want to or not.
So what's do you have to score, like, if you score a certain amount of points, or is it just
it's kind of a loose
winning?
It's kind of more of a feeling. Like there's kind of some general marks that are considered A and not A, or pro and not pro.
Okay.
Like for the weight over bar is usually a good measuring stick. Because it's a pretty flat, it's a very flat, easy to wrap your mind around number. If you can hit 12 feet in weight over bar, you should probably be an A.
Okay.
Versus, you know what I mean? Like the opening height for pros is 13. Like that's just the opening height. And that's a low pro games. A lot of pro games start at 14 or 15.
So when you started, what do you remember what some of your marks were, like your first year in competition?
Yep, my first game, I got second.
Okay.
I came out and I won the first 2 events because they were stones, and it's shot put. It's shot put with a rock. There's really no transition. Honestly, I found stone easier than a shot. There's more surface area to push on.
And how much do the stones weigh?
16 and 22 pounds.
16 and 22.
So 22 pounds you do from a power position standing throw. 16 pounds open, so you can spin, you can glide, you can shuffle, you can stand there. So I won the first 2 events because there's no learning curve for those.
Right.
And apparently, like, there was one of the guys who was a pro there on the field, and he wasn't a very good pro, but he was already trailing 4 points or 2 points after the first 2 events.
Right.
And he was just like, God damn this kid. And like I was like, apparently I had a really shitty name for the first 2 years. But then I got the man maker events, the 56 for distance.
Sure.
That is the event where there's nothing that prepares you for it other than doing it.
Right.
I threw 19 feet my first games, which is pretty, let's call it par for the course for people starting with the 56. It sucks. It sucks.
So would you so not to jump ahead too much, so the last competition you competed in, what'd you get for distance for the 56?
So my last, I was in Richmond, so we were in a downpour. So I had 35. Okay. So my best last year, 39.6. That was my best last year.
So you've almost doubled. Well, you have doubled since you started. Yeah. So so it's taken about 6 years or so.
Oh, a little more than no.
Oh,
I am about to hit in June. We'll start my 15th season doing the Highland Games.
wow. So you did compete when you were so you competed when you were in high school then.
The summer after my freshman year of college, I started. So
Okay.
so I did freshman year at Alfred State up
Sure.
until May, and my first competition was the first weekend in June.
So Highland isn't something where you're gonna pick it up necessarily right away. Where it does take a
Some
little bit
people
of time.
do. It depends on where you are in your physicality standpoint. Like,
Sure.
because we've seen an increase in guys who are very high level track and field.
Hmm.
Like two of the guys that were at the U.S. Championships last year, guys that I compete against regularly,
Sure.
for in the Olympic Hammer,
Okay.
Colin Dunbar
Yeah.
and the hell's Gary's last name? Gary. It's escaping me right now. Give me a
Sure.
second; it'll come to me.
Sure.
But they were both at U.S. Championships
Okay.
last year
Right.
for the Hammer.
Okay.
So you're getting to see more elite level guys.
Right.
And they are, like they're picking it up faster, mostly based on they're just stronger, better athletes for throwing.
Right.
But they're still having certain events where like the caber is the tree
Right.
is just if you haven't thrown it, there's nothing like it.
So Dunbar, so he's like what? Because you and I are almost about the same height, maybe 6 foot,
Yeah,
6'1".
6'8".
He's 6'8". Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
6'8".
Okay.
He's like I don't want to call him fat, but he's like 320, 330. He's
Right.
big.
Yeah.
He's grounded for being that tall.
Right.
He's got the long ass hair. Dick.
So, so how
But
many?
he's like honestly, I really enjoyed hanging out with him.
Right.
So like some events like the Scottish Hammers, he picked them up really fast.
Sure.
But the stones, he's probably the best stone thrower on the circuit right now for the pro circuit.
Okay.
Because he hit almost 58 feet out in Queen Mary, South California.
Okay. So with the 16, he hit 58. Yep. Okay. So how many meets? So after you graduated from college, how long did it take before you made the decision, or what helped you make the decision to, you know what, I'm pretty good at this. I'm going to dedicate myself more to it, and I'm going to transition to pro. Like, is it like you just decide you're pro, or you get like somebody tells you
that's
you
kind
are?
of how that's kind of how our system works for being pro.
Sure.
Is basically you declare yourself pro,
okay,
but there's also no going back. That's the kind of determining factor once you turn pro.
Sure.
You can't you can't ungo pro essentially. But then what happens as well is I can't just sign up for games anymore. I have to either be invited or put in for them and then be decided on.
Okay.
I can no longer just like, oh, hey, there's the games down in Ohio. Let me sign up for it and just go. I have to be invited to games. So that's what keeps you training and making sure that you're making it worth the games time because they're paying you. And let's say the pro money for Highland Games is decent compared to other sports, other strength sports. Mm-hmm. So your entertainment on a festival field, if you are not worth their dollar, they're not going to pay you anymore. They're going to invite somebody else.
Okay. So what helps somebody then? So I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So so I've never done it before. So I'm not going to decide to go pro. Right. But like what would be some decent marks for somebody that it's like, you know what? I got a collection of swords and like this paraphernalia. Let me make the decision to compete against people like that's gonna raise my game a little bit as well.
Right. So and that's where I was at too. Is I had certain marks that I wanted to be able to hit before I turned pro.
Right.
Being able to hit 39 in the heavyweight was one of them.
Okay.
Being able to hit 75 in the lightweight was one of them. The 28-pound weight.
Sure.
Going over 100 consistently in the 22-pound hammer. Mm-hmm. And then going over 120 consistently in the 16-pound hammer. Okay. Being able with the sheaf toss, which is the pitchfork in the bag, mm-hmm. the weight goes up when you go pro. Okay. So as an amateur, you're 16 pounds. As a pro, that's 20. That's really the only thing that changes weight wise. Okay. And the capers are bigger. They're always bigger when you're a pro. Sure. So for me, it was more of a consistency thing. Mm-hmm. Being able to hit certain marks on a consistent level. Okay. And then knowing So I planned in 2015. I decided I wanted to go pro before I turned 30.
Okay.
So they gave me 2 years to get and spent that time. I won the East Coast Amateur Championship in 2015. So that was you don't have to win one of those games, those high level games, but it does help. It helps your cause. So after I won that, and I went to the U.S. Team Championships and won twice. I was on the winning team twice. So those are kind of my feathers in my cap for like saying, okay, I'm a pro, I'm ready to do this. So I spent time, that was 2 years, talking to athletic directors.
What, like athletic directors of meets, like competitions?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, because they're the ones who decide if you come or not.
Yeah.
Like you can be like, and there's guys that, and I'll get into an example here in a second, but you can go pro too soon because you could have great marks, but if nobody knows who you are, because the ADs don't watch the boards like track and field would. They know who they know because you've come to their games as an amateur, you put your time in, and they're okay. Oh, you're going pro. I have a spot open. I'll give it to you because I know you. I know what you're like in front of the crowd. I know you're not a dickhead to the judges.
Sure.
Those factors go in. There's a lot of guys that. This isn't track and field. I love the NCAA. I'll never forget my times as an NCAA athlete, but nothing is guaranteed here. Your marks don't guarantee you anything.
Okay.
You're being paid by the festival to be entertainment for the people who pay to get in the gate.
Sure.
So if you aren't entertaining in some way, if you have a bad attitude, if you're super inconsistent with your throws, if you can't throw caber, that ends up getting a lot of people disinvited. Sure. You have to have more than just good numbers. Really, there's only one guy in the world right now that is good enough that he can just rely on his numbers and he could just flip the crowd the middle finger when he walks off the field if he wanted to.
Sure.
Spencer Tyler out of Texas, New Braunfels, Texas. He's the only. He doesn't. He's a good thrower, but he's the only guy right now that is his numbers are so good that he could do that. Everybody else, you still need to go out there, make sure you're shaking people's hands, you're being nice to the judges, and that's it. Those people pay to come see you. It's not like a track and field meet where the only people that come to track and field meets are coaches and parents. That's it. Nobody goes to hang out at the local meet. Like you and I might, but
nobody else
people are
is
selling beer. They're selling entertainment. Like people will sit down, they'll buy beer, and they will sit there all day in front of the field because they're having a great time watching the throwers.
Right. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No,
I was gonna say. So now that you're transitioned pro, you've traveled all over the country. Like you're established. How do you do you have a training group? Like, are there people like in more in the southern tier that you can
so I kind of that was part of my goal is to get a small training group put together. And for partially selfish reasons, it's just a help for accountability. Right. If you have some people to train with, you have some people to practice with, it makes practice more fun sometimes when you're not always out there by yourself.
Right.
And quite honestly too, it keeps me from overthrowing if I have more people there. Because you can and you know that too, like you're by yourself. It doesn't take that long to go fetch something. Like you can overthrow pretty easy. Right. So it gives me the allotted time. Like there's a couple people in between throws.
Sure.
And then me personally, one of the reasons I like coaching, I coached at Colgate for a year in the Patriot League.
That's right.
And then my big thing is I run a lot of clinics for the Highland Games. And part of the reason I do that is from my personal belief, if you're able to coach it and explain it, you're going to understand it on a better level yourself. Right. So you're going to, and that was one of the reasons I feel like I'm better at the sport is because I understand it at that different level because I've taken the time to try to explain it to other people.
Right. So how often do you run your camps and clinics? Because you're do you have them in Belfast, Cuba? Are you?
I usually do 2-3 a year. There's one or two I'll host. I'll do them in Belmont. We do a training group in Nunday, New York sometimes, which is in the middle of nowhere. But the reason we do it there is it's a horse barn. Sure. So this time of year, a lot of times we'll get a group together and we're able to start getting some reps in the winter, in February and in March.
Right.
You're limited on what events you can do, but you can do some of the events.
Right.
And it's great for especially new people to get a feel for it.
So with so like events like the Caber, let's say,
Yeah.
so where do you find one, or like how do you practice that?
Your
You just
favorite
cut a
course.
tree down, or what? Yeah.
That's just it. Like there's no standard. There's when it comes to your group, you know kind of the range of caber sizes that you'll encounter, and
Sure.
that's it.
So how much does it weigh? Like
So
for an
you're
amateur?
talking so for a pro caber,
Yeah, pro caber.
you're talking anywhere between 16 and 22 feet,
Okay.
and you're talking anywhere between 95 to 140-ish pounds, 150 pounds.
That's
And it ends up being a lot of times it's the length. The length is the hardest part.
okay.
Because you're only so you'll carry it basically with this much of your body from shoulder to
Right.
here. This is the only contact you have.
Right.
So if it's 20 feet tall, I only got 2 feet of it right here.
Right.
So that other 18 feet is up in the breeze. And if it's a green caber, like it's something that's freshly cut, it'll have a nice little wobble to it.
Sure. So because you just mentioned before we started recording, so you just hit a big squat PR, right? 600 pounds.
600 pounds.
Okay. So now that you sit down and you're thinking about your games for this year, like how do you like you because you mentioned accountability in your training group. So like how do you sit down and write out like goals, or do you kind of like decide like, last year I was kind of weak in the light hammer, so I'm going to focus on this, or how's that work?
Yep, no, that's exactly. You're basically hitting the nail on the head. I kind of after my last games is in October, the Halloween weekend. So my season's pretty long. So my season goes from the end of April to the end of October. So it's a pretty long season. So I sit down after that and start writing my goals out. Where was I weak? Where was I? What do I need to continue? What do I need to get better at? So like last year, my stones fell apart. Something I've kind of been relying on for a long time.
Right.
My stones really fell apart, so I kind of had to break down what happened, and just kind of go back to the basics. And what I did to address it. Part of my problem last year was we had a really long winter last year. If you don't remember, like we had snow up until May. It just wouldn't let go. Yeah. So I didn't have a single practice in before my first competition, just lifting and gym reps. So I got my ass handed to me out there in Sacramento, which is like the big pro opener, season opener essentially, which I was fortunate enough to get in. And then I was personally embarrassed because I didn't I was fine getting last in that group because it was an incredible group, but it wasn't up to my expectations of where I should be as a pro. Right. So how I adjusted for that this year is I joined a gym in Elmira. My job is in Corning, New York.
Right.
I joined a gym in Elmira, which used to be an indoor tennis facility. I have room to do drills and live throws in there.
Wow, that's great.
So not every event, but shot put and heavyweight for distance. I've made a 56-pound weight out of a 50-pound medicine ball. Okay. And hockey net.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how many? So you start April to about October, so Halloween. So how many games do you compete in a year?
As a pro, I don't do as many as I did as my longest as an amateur. I did 22 games in a year once. Yeah, it's insane. I'm closer to around 15 to 18 games a year now.
So that's pretty much every other weekend for the most part.
There'll be stretches through June, I'm in every weekend. Okay. And then July, there's only like 1 or 2 games. And then August is pretty heavy. I go back to Scotland this year. I did 4 competitions in a week in Scotland. Right. That's just how it goes over there. Like you get the stretch of games week. So it was kind of cool. I did a festival on a Wednesday, and it was like a huge festival too. There's a ton of people there. Right. I got there. Over there is different. You don't like get invited. There's certain games you get invited to, but for the most part, you actually just show up. Okay. They appreciate like a little heads up that you might be coming, but regardless, if you just show up, you're there. Right. And ended up being I called it Backyard World Championships. I went against 7 of the top 15 guys in the world in this random backyard games in Scotland.
Wow. So what's that feel like? Like you competed 4 times in a week in Scotland. Like
It
what?
was it was
like
different. It was very different. I was there. It was a very surreal experience just getting to go there for the first time. And we
sure.
were there on a charity mission with Uncle Sam's Highlanders.
Okay.
And we can get into that in a second.
Sure.
But so I was kind of just in awe of just being there.
All right.
But that game I went to in Killin, Scotland, which it's killing, but just without the G.
Okay.
So,
Scotland.
it took me my flight. I had 2 flight cancellations on the way there. So from my door in New York to the time when I walked into the hotel in Inverness, Scotland, 50 hours door to door.
Jeez. And then
So
you got off
just-
a plane and competed.
Yeah, basically, I had about so by the time I got there about 11, and the van left for Killin at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And like after all that travel, you're not just falling asleep.
Right.
So I just started drinking scotch. I was like, all right, well,
Sure.
This is exactly what I said. I'm like, I literally can't be more tired than I am right now. Like, I'll just be asleep. There's no way I can be more exhausted than I am right now. And quite honestly, it was kind of a rainy, sluggish day. I kind of outweighed it. The last 3 events were my best 3 events. I ended up placing really well in that group, basically because I'm like, I'm just bringing people down to my level. I was so exhausted. So
tell us about that. So you just mentioned the Uncle Sam's Highlanders. What's that about?
What it is it's a group put together by a disabled veteran by the name of Alex Tank Armor.
Okay.
And he put this group together. He asked me to be a part of it because we've met and he knows the festival that I run. We donate to a veterans charity every year.
Okay.
And basically all the proceeds go to that. We run it as a complete not-for-profit. And then we've got to meet each other, and he knew I did a bunch of clinics and stuff. So he invited me to be the pro on this team.
Oh, great.
So I got to represent the U.S. in that way. So we took over 2 elite women, myself, and then 4 disabled athletes.
Okay.
Or differently abled, or however they want to call them.
Sure.
I call them all Autobots because that's fun.
Right.
But we had one guy who's in a wheelchair, one guy who is a double amputee, leg amputee, one who's a single amputee, and then one guy who is a double amputee. Well, he's not a double amputee. He was born without legs.
Okay.
Born piriformis is the term they use. But he's an incredibly strong athlete, and he actually coaches and does. He's actually done some training with Adrian. Recently, he's part of the going to be part of the Special Olympics team. I think he's going in for the JAV. So I know he was working with Adrian at the boot camp she recently did.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we took that we put that team together. We did a bunch of corporate fundraising, and we were able to go over there and teach. So I was able. Part of the reason was to be able to do clinics, to run a clinic and teach the UK Wounded Warriors, disabled veterans, how to get into the games, and we did a whole games over there,
great.
and in front of the royal family. So I got to meet Prince Charles and win a games in front of the royal family over there.
So how do you top that then? I mean, it's
pretty high up there. Like that's a feather in my cap that a lot of Americans cannot say. And because I know Prince Charles hasn't been at that games in a while because it had really gone downhill. So that was this project was part of their idea to reinvigorate the game. So it went from 300 people in 2017 to 5,000 people there in 2018 with this new project.
So what's it like to throw in front of that many people and compete?
Oh, it's an awesome experience. Hitting, especially the height events, hitting a big height in front of that kind of crowd it's an electric feeling that I can't just, unless you've competed in front of that many people, it's just a feeling I can't describe, just the energy you get from people.
So you get nervous. I mean, like, because it's not. I mean, these are people like you said that like they pay to come watch and
right. That's like, one of the reasons I think I've done well in this sport is I feed off that. I feed off that energy from the people in the crowd. Because I'll sit there, like, I hop the fence and I'll sit with people the whole, like, I'll sit, like, you know what I mean? I take beers from people. They buy me. It's a great time. So I really enjoy that part of it. So the bigger games, the bigger crowd, I ride on that energy with people.
Mhm.
Because
So
they're there. Nobody's there to heckle you. Like so, like even though you're not on your home field, every game's a home game. Like every game's a
right,
home crowd. So you don't
right,
like have people like booing you or anything like
right,
that. So it's a
right,
very so it's not like an away game for like a team sport.
right.
Like everybody's there just to see you do well, no matter who you are.
Mhm.
So
So
that
what? So the first game that you have coming up, where's that taking place this
so
year?
that is the Woodland Scottish Festival in
Mhm.
Sacramento.
Okay.
Yep.
So
So
is
I head
that
out there end of April.
and that's like the early pro opener, like you said,
Yeah,
and
yep. That's basically the official like pro opener to the season. There's
Mhm.
nothing really official about it, but
Sure.
like more recently they've added a couple games have gone pro that are in February and March.
Okay.
So some of those guys in the Southwest have been going to those because
Mhm.
that's where they are.
Right.
So that's been nice for them. So they're going to be more people will be trying to get into them. Personally, I don't need anything that's going to make my season 2-3 months longer.
Right.
Um, you know what I mean? Like it's
Yep.
already a long season by the time I get to Richmond, Virginia, in the end of October,
Mhm.
which is a great games. Like I would personally would rather my season be done by October, but it's such a
Right.
good game, so it's like let's go. Like you can't
Right.
do it. So I just kind of just rest and I kind of start my off season programming
Mhm.
in October and just keep my practice up so
Mhm.
I'm able to throw once Richmond comes around.
So then how do you pick and choose if you compete like 15 times a year, let's say? So obviously there's like a US championships and
Right.
then
And
okay, so
that's basically that's my career goal is to get
Mhm.
into the US Pro Championship.
Okay.
I've been to amateur worlds.
Mhm.
I've been to the amateur US team championships. There really is no US amateur championship
Okay.
uh, officially. Like they've had there'll be games that like do it once and then they don't do it again. Like so I've been to the games that I need to from that level. Um, and then getting into worlds is kind of a long shot for me. More of a, when it comes to like a realistic standpoint,
Mhm.
like I'm already, in my opinion, punching outside my weight class because
Right.
most of the guys I'm going against were Division 1 freaks of some kind.
Mhm.
Guys who were 19-meter shot putters, 20-meter
Right.
shot putters, 70-meter hammer throwers,
Right.
former NFL players.
Mhm.
Um, and then there's a couple other guys that are just like traditional, like super good and have just only really done the Highland Games. There's a couple of
Right.
them as well,
Sure.
but just the elite level is up there for me. So is there a chance? Obviously, if I put the
Mhm.
time in and stuff.
Sure.
But for me, the career goal would be to get into the U.S. Pro Championship,
Mhm.
which is the top 10 U.S. pros in the country.
So where do
Uh,
you rank right now?
I haven't looked for this year so far. It's too early because
Oh,
there'll be
sure.
people with zeros on the board, and
Right.
the official ranking for that board actually starts August 1st.
Okay.
So the invitation period goes from August 1st to July 31st, and
Okay.
then the games being the fourth weekend in September.
Mhm. So
So
how do you
that's
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So how do you balance how do you that work life balance? Because you
Yeah.
you work full time,
Yep.
like you're a professional Highland Games athlete. Like
Yep.
how do you do that?
Just time budget. And part of my career choice had a lot to do with my love for the games right now. Um, I listen. One of the things I'm good at is listening to the old throwers.
Mhm.
And so many of them, like, oh man, I wish I'd done this when I was younger. I wish
Right.
I'd taken it more seriously when I was younger. Now they're masters athletes and they're taking it more seriously, but for the most part, their bodies have betrayed them because they took so many years off
Right.
from whatever.
Mhm.
So I listened to that, so I kind of took it seriously,
Mhm.
and that's why I wanted to turn pro before I was 30.
Mhm.
And actually, I'm still one of the youngest pros on the circuit
Mhm.
for the most part. So that which
Okay.
is kind of nice.
Mhm.
Uh, but it's just more so I'm an insurance broker, but I run my own agency.
Mhm.
So I don't have to answer to anybody.
Right.
So if I want to take the afternoon off to go practice, or like especially in the summer, I'll start my day early and I'll be done by 4, so I can lift and throw
Right.
and be done by like 7-8 o'clock, and it's not too bad. Um,
So what advice do you have for somebody who like I'm kind of interested in it, but I kind of thrown, but I haven't thrown in a long time. So
sure.
somebody who's just, I want to try it. It looks kind of fun. Like what advice do you have for them or like where can you point them as far as like some resources?
So find the local guy who makes equipment. And people, if anybody reaches out to me, I'll put them in touch with. Usually, there's a guy in Fredonia that really makes the best stuff in the U.S., but it all depends on if you are able to get it shipped there or not.
Sure.
He was able to get me a 28-pound weight and both hammers in one if it fits at ship's box from the U.S. Post Office.
Wow.
I got a call from the post office because of a small town, 900 people.
Sure.
Like they know who you are. I got a call the postmaster from the town. He's like, I don't know what and he used a very bad word. I don't know what the bleep is in here, but come get it. Because one of his guys tried to pick it up off the truck and almost fell. It was 70 pounds in a box this big.
So who's the guy in Fredonia?
Mike Landrich.
Mike Landrich?
Landrich. He makes Highland Games equipment, and he also makes strongman equipment. But there's a lot of guys that try to do it, but the advantage with Mike is Mike's an actual welder by trade. He's a metal worker by trade, so his stuff just has that expert level to it. Like, I bought his stuff, and it still hasn't broken. Like, that was the first equipment I bought was from him. So usually my recommendation is get a heavyweight for your class, get a light hammer, and then get a stone. And that stone is just I personally like to go to garden stores because they have, if you go to the ones that have the landscaping stuff, they have them separated out into the category of small boulders.
Right.
I take a fishing scale and a canvas bag and I weigh them on site.
Okay, and then do you take a 16? You would recommend to somebody a 16 and a 22?
Yep, a 16 and a 22.
Sure.
And if it's a girl, you want a 9 and a 12.
Okay. And then how about hammers? How about hammers for girls?
So the girls, they throw the 16 as well. Okay. But that's their heavy hammer.
Sure.
Where their light hammer is the 12.
Okay.
Just from a technique standpoint, you're better off doing reps with the 12 than you are the 16. It's very similar until you get to the very elite level. There's really no difference in the two. So it's just better. It's better rep work to be able to go faster than it is to go heavier in that particular event. And then the heavyweight, because that's 2 events. That's why you want a heavyweight, because it's 2 events in one implement.
Okay.
And then once you get serious, then you buy a lightweight, you buy a heavy hammer. What's that?
How about a kilt? Where would you like?
Sport kilt.
Anywhere? Yeah.
Sport kilt.
Oh, sport kilt. Okay.
Yep. They are. They support the Highland Games so much. USA kilts is nice. They have some cool patterns that are unique. Like I have a USA kilt from that was it was actually a memorial tartan for 9/11. The Dennis Leary Foundation made this very special tartan for 9/11, and all the proceeds from that went to the families for those firefighters. So I have one of those, but I also have 3 other kilts from Sport Kilt that I've been given to for certain games. Like when we went to Scotland, Sport Kilt sponsored our team. They bought us all brand new Team USA kilts.
Wow, that's cool.
That's Sport Kilt's nice because they're machine washable. So you're going to get them muddy. They're going to get chalky. They're going to get covered in tacky that you use for the hammer, or use tacky for the caber as well. You throw a little on the back of your knuckles so your hands stay locked. So, and there's, once you get in, like you find a couple people on Facebook, is honestly, that's helped the sport grow a lot. And then the information is shared really well that way.
So how, if somebody wants to get in touch with you specifically, like Instagram, Twitter, email, like what's the best
Matt
way?
Hand Throws.
Okay, right over your shoulders there. Perfect.
At Matt Hand Throws. That's Twitter and Instagram.
Okay.
That's the easiest place. I post a lot of training videos on there. As well as it's easy. I'm really big on directing people to like if you're not in my area, I'll direct you to someone who can get you in touch.
Sure.
One of the best things you can do is find a training group. Because especially if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't like I figured a lot of this out on my own to begin with, but I had a track and field background. I had the knowledge to figure it out.
Right.
And be able to watch video and understand why certain things are the way they are. But if you don't have that background, it's not necessarily going to make sense.
Right.
So like just that ability to like keep your feet turning and drive through your toes and all those different things, understanding that level of it. So it's easier to find a training group because then you can get past a lot of the initial mistakes right off the bat.
Right. So is there anything I forgot to ask that you want to mention, or anything else for the good of
No,
the
man,
order
this is a
here?
great time. I love this sport. I find that so as I'm coming into my 15th year doing
Mhm.
it, I find there's a lot of guys that are 10-year plus that do this sport and stick with it because it's good people.
Right.
Um, it drums out bad attitude people
Hmm.
because you don't get invited to things, and
Right.
it's a big enough group of good people
Mhm.
that shit isn't tolerated.
Right.
Bad attitudes, mean mugging people, like that powerlifting thing,
Right.
or
Yeah.
the hell's that dickhead powerlifter with the ponytail, Kai Green. Like he like smacks people with his ponytail
All
on
right.
stage. Like I'm like you wouldn't get invited back in the Highland Games for stuff like
Right.
that.
Right.
And I've seen people who are pros not get invited back
Hmm.
because of poor attitudes.
Hmm.
ADs don't want any of it.
Right. So you're in Corning. I'm in Rochester. So what?
Yep.
So how many meets, like, if somebody wanted to compete between where we live this summer, is there anything
So you could do
available?
basically a whole season in New York and never leave the state.
Okay.
Um, you got my games. So in
Yeah. Tell
order,
us about that. Yeah. Tell us about
yeah,
your
yeah.
game.
So in
Yeah.
order, you have the games in Canandaigua, which is the only games in Rochester right now.
Right.
Which I'd like to grow eventually. Long-term goal, I would love to host a big festival in Rochester, like my kind of 15-year goal.
Right.
Do something in one of the big parks in the city.
Hmm.
Um, then my games that I host in Cuba, New York,
Hmm.
which is on Cuba Lake. And it's a nice little artisan food town, a lot
Hmm.
of cheese and things like
Yep.
that. Little casino there
Hmm.
because it's close to the Indian reservation.
Hmm.
Then a pretty little lake community. We host that there. That's the one we do with a veteran charity.
Okay.
Um, and then we actually have pros at that one.
Hmm.
That's the first weekend in June. I know the Genesee County Museum is actually thinking about bringing their games back in June, which would be
Okay.
mid-June.
Okay.
That's the
Cool.
game that was my first games. That's where I fell in love with the sport.
Hmm.
So I would love to see that games come back. Um, Amherst, the Amherst Historical Village.
Okay.
Buffalo hosts one in
Buffalo.
August. Jamestown hosts one in late August.
Okay.
Syracuse in the first week of August.
Hmm.
Then you have Dundee, New York, which is between us and the Finger
Yep.
Lakes.
Yep.
That's Paul Rose, coach of U of R.
Yep.
He runs that one.
Okay.
Paul's a retired pro,
Hmm.
um, which was always fun growing up. Getting your ass handed to you by Paul, like a guy that you're being coached against, and
Right.
then go to like get in. It's fun.
Right.
He didn't like me till I came to Brockport. He did not like me when I was at Alfred State. But once I came to Brockport, which was his alma mater, he started liking me. So
Right.
that was nice.
Yeah.
He's gotten a lot nicer in his old age. Old age
Yes,
has
he's
been kind
definitely mellowed out a little bit in the
to
last 10 or so years.
old Paul Rose was extreme.
Yeah. Mellowed out a
The
lot.
Walrus when he was
Yeah.
the Walrus back in the day.
Right. That's right.
Then you have the biggest festival in this area from an attendance standing is the Niagara Celtic Festival,
Okay.
which is it's either the second or third weekend, whatever weekend is in the teens every year. So
Sure.
like this year it's like 14th, 15th.
Okay.
They're actually moving their locations to the Niagara County Fairgrounds this year. It's a little bit
Wow.
bigger venue,
Okay.
but it's a Lockport
Right.
is where it'll be.
Okay.
But they've had in attendance over like for a weekend they'll do over 50,000 people
Wow.
for the whole
Wow,
weekend.
that's huge.
Yeah, huge number
Right,
of
that's
people.
huge.
You get for the area, it's the last festival of the year.
Okay.
So you get everybody and their brother wants to come to it. They get a lot of bands. And the people that run it have been doing it very well for a long time. So they advertise it well. It's a really well-oiled machine at this point. So that's one of the reasons. Athletically, it's not a huge venue for us. But this year, I think it will be because our field's going to expand because we have bigger grounds. So like traditionally, we've never done hammer there.
Okay.
Like I'd murder people if we had a hammer because there's just not enough room.
Right.
We barely have enough room to do the lightweight for distance at the old field. So this new field, I've been told we'll at least be able to do heavy hammer.
Okay.
Which is nice. And it's good for me because those are some of my better events. So like when I go against Nick Kahanick, like I can't have a short field day, like because those take up my good events.
Right.
And that's just that him and I, we've been, Nick Kahanick was a Roberts Wesleyan thrower.
That's
for
right.
your viewers out there. But him and I, we travel together a lot. He's one of the guys that helped push me be a pro. Now Nick isn't necessarily the thrower that he used to be. He had ACL reconstruction. He had to have his gallbladder out. He almost had to have heart surgery. I love Nick, but he trains like a modern day athlete and recovers like Babe Ruth, and that doesn't work.
I can only imagine. Yeah, right.
But he's one of my best friends in the world. We've been traveling doing the games now for 14 of that 15 years. So he's one of the ones that pushed me to be a pro. But still, like naturally, he's still one of the best shot putters, like and stone throwers in the country for the sport.
Right.
You know what I mean? He was a 19-meter shot putter as a sophomore at Roberts Wesleyan.
Right.
So those natural skills don't go away.
Right. Well,
So,
thanks, man. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that was good. So you can do a whole season in New York,
Sure.
And never leave the state. And then there's good games in Ohio, Pennsylvania. I like to go. There's good games in Massachusetts, so you don't have to go far. And then I go across the border into Canada a lot. They take them very seriously there, which is nice.
So like Toronto, like York area,
yeah, just outside. There's nothing in the major cities.
Sure,
they're more in the outskirts. But because they're really big UK and British communities, like their legions up there, like our version of the American Legion, are all retired British soldiers.
Right.
So they're the ones that end up running a lot of those games as well. Those I forget what they call them, but it's basically their version of the Legion.
Sure.
So I go up there. I do 3 games a year up there, pro games, which is nice because they do more pro games up there than we do down here.
Cool.
So,
well, you definitely keep busy. I still
man.
Trying to wrap my head around how you do a full-time job and almost sounds like full-time training, but you've managed to figure it out. And then you sneak out to the West Coast every once in a while, too.
I don't watch much TV or anything until the weekend. I get caught up on my shows on the weekend. That's where. So it's like work, training, bed, repeat until the weekend, and then I get caught up on Netflix.
Sure. Which is kind of unusual for someone as young. I mean, you're a lot younger than I am to have. The college kids that I coach now. I mean, they're 18 years old.
Yeah.
18 years old too. They haven't quite figured that out yet. So.
Well, I was almost an adult when Netflix came around. So I'm not doing it wrong. Like I'll get buried in a Criminal Minds marathon as quick as anybody. Like you'll start it on Friday night, and all of a sudden, like, oh God, it's Monday. Like and have nightmares about serial killers for the next 3 days because you've been doing nothing but watching Criminal Minds.
Yeah, right.
Unsubs.
Yeah, right. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. We're not quite to 4 hours like Joe Rogan was.
Yes, there's no Joe Rogan and Alex Jones podcast, but
we're pretty close. Pretty close. Well, if we get half the viewers and listeners, I think we'd be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, man.
All right, buddy. Hey, I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Hey, have a good one. Have me on again.
I will. Take care. Thank you.
All right.